Kawuriyao Kanukuhuti. Kawuriyao Kanukuhuti. Kawuriyao Kanukuhuti.
The state of emergency in parts of Northern California, 1,000 more acres destroyed.
It was just getting closer and closer, and the wind was just blowing.
Climate change is making these heat waves more frequent, causing things like droughts and wildfire.
Just trying to grapple with what we had just seen. And I don't even think that there's anybody that can adequately describe it.
Aaron Hillman narrowly escaped the 2020 Slater fire that killed 2 people near the base camp for the Karuk Tribe.
I took off in my car and went down to Happy Camp, ran through the store, started grabbing boxes, telling everybody, you know, there's a fire, it's going, you know, we got to get going.
The Karuk Tribe Director of Operations drove down to her family-owned grocery store to warn her husband, employees, and residents about the fire that broke out that September 8th morning. Erin and her husband hurried to save what they could at home, including their cat.
I grabbed her, and as I'm running out the door, my husband's going, hurry, hurry, hurry. He's got the truck backed up to the fence back here. And all I remember is just looking over my shoulder. I had her in my one arm, and I looked over my shoulder, and everything was on fire.
But for the Hillmans and their neighbors, getting out of their home was only the first obstacle.
Like a little caravan, we were all, you know, in our cars, and we would go up a little ways and we would stop.
Finding a route out would prove to be a matter of life and death.
And all of a sudden we saw the fire popping up behind us, coming over the ridge, and it was getting ready to block us from our escape route.
Luckily, the small caravan of cars made it out. The Slater fire burned more than 150,000 acres, destroyed nearly 200 homes, and killed 2 people. Stories of fire outbreaks have become so common in California, but for the Karuk Tribe, it's a frustrating situation.
Climate change has created this disaster waiting to happen. And so unless we do something, we are proactive about that, we're going to continue to have these kinds of disasters. And people's lives are going to be lost.
Living in the same serene banks of the Klamath River in the secluded Klamath-Siskiyou forests, the Karuk Tribe's way of life has been somewhat preserved. That's until the last century and a half. Before the devastating Slater fire in 2020, the Karuk Tribe of Indians created the Climate Adaptation Plan in hopes of preventing more catastrophic fire events. But tragedy struck before it could be adopted by legislatures or worked on as a potential state bill.
Well, it's intended to be a working document, lets people know that there's something different that can be done.
Bill Tripp is a member of the Karuk Tribe and the co-author of the plan. He says their native people have always been able to manage the land and be a part of the landscape through generations of tribal practices.
Oh, hey, oh,
I was raised in the ancestral village of Karuk on the lower Salmon River. My great-grandma taught me how to use fire starting when I was 4 years old, and paying attention to the animals and the plants and everything in nature to be, so they can serve as our guide.
Distinct to the Karuk Tribe is cultural burning.
The cultural burn, it's a little bit different. It's like you're not parsing the landscape out into these distinct little units. You're picking times of year when the conditions are just right to where this component of the ecosystem will burn, whereas this one right next to it won't.
Tripp says their system of diverse trees and plants not only helped feed the people through acorns, native crops, and medicinal plants, but created a diverse forest with different burning properties.
But if you've got pine trees mixed with black oak and white oak and madrone, yeah, you can burn that after 4 days of sun in February.
Cultural burning wasn't just a form of ceremonial practice, but a way to keep their grasses, shrubs, and forest floors from becoming big fuel for lightning outbreaks. Craig Tucker, a natural resources policy advocate for the Karuk Tribe, has been working for decades to bring change to the tribe's ancestral lands.
Native people had managed that landscape for acorn-bearing oak trees to feed the people, and they used fire for that management. If you don't put fire in, then those forests are overgrown by Doug firs and conifers. And so that's what we see today in the Klamath, where it's like a giant stand of Doug fir. And the timber industry really liked that. Those trees grow fast, they grow straight, they make good 2x4s.
As settlers moved into the forests of the Karuk and other indigenous peoples in the mid-1850s, gold mining, then eventually logging practices, were in the forefront. Karuk people were killed off, forced to move to reservations, and some fled into the mountains.
They discovered gold, and they stopped signing treaties. The way it was understood at the time of the signing was there was just going to be people, more people here, living here with us and taking care of the place. That isn't necessarily what it turned out to be.
Bill says the dispersal of the tribe over the last 170 years has proven to have profound effects on forest management.
There were hundreds, well over 100 villages in the stretch of the river from Orleans up through Happy Camp and Salmon River country. You figure if each one of those villages had 3 people that focused on just doing that kind of small patchwork burning at every opportunity, that's 150 fires going simultaneously throughout the river corridor, 15, 20, 30 days a year or more. That's a lot of fire with very few people.
A lot of that landscape is owned and managed by the U.S. Forest Service. So the tribe is not able to simply practice their traditional land management practices without forging some kind of agreement with federal agencies.
Craig is working to undam the Upper Klamath River to help salmon, the staple of their diet, thrive.
How we treat tribes and tribal people, I think, is a reflection of what kind of people we all are. But I think tribes have a lot to teach us. We need to know how to live in this place without driving the fish extinct. How do we live in this place without fires burning down our house? Well, the Karuk have figured that out, and they're willing to share that information with the rest of us.
We're doing something good together, all of us.
When fire burns through an area, it chews up the forest and destroys the trees and underbrush that holds all the dirt and rock in place. That happened about a week ago near a place called Happy Camp.
The Karuk Tribe's Aboriginal land makes up about 1 million acres. As wildfires roar through the Siskiyou and Klamath National Forests, tribal members are witnessing different ways of life from what they learned through their ancestors. Tribal member Kenneth Brink, also known as Binks, knows this all too well.
Yeah, I lived on the Klamath River and for 45 years. Other than going to school and I've lived here pretty much all my life, being tribal, growing up as a ceremonial person, being involved with our traditional ways. People along the river would start burning their little piles because we knew fire was coming. We knew that we had to manage our land. We had to do fuels reductions.
Binks has seen his fair share of fires, floods, and destruction.
In California, the McKinney fire is raging out of control.
Just this year, the McKinney fire experienced a major landslide after thunderstorms dumped heavy rain over a burn scar. The Klamath River didn't fare well.
Friday I go out and I see thousands and thousands of dead fish. So it's like a big old plume moving through of zero oxygen and killing everything in its way. It's hard to say what lived and what didn't.
Working with the U.S. Department of Natural Resources Fisheries Division, Binks saw it all firsthand.
What hits home with those fish is that a lot of people will be like, oh, that's not a salmon, it's just a sucker, right? But they're very important. These fish are very old. They don't mature for like 10 years. So they can't reproduce for like a decade. And they get up to be like 20, 30 years old. So they're like our elders of our river.
Fish to the Karuk tribe are precious.
You know, it was really a combination of fire exclusion and poor forest management. Layer on top of that, the freak weather that comes from global warming, and you get a fish kill.
You know, I've worked fisheries for 20 plus years now, and I've fished all my life, and I've watched our tributaries dry up, our fish almost go extinct.
Previously a firefighter and now working with fisheries, Bink says he's been on both sides of the aisle, and it all comes down to money over preservation.
Now, it's not a gold rush, it's what I call a fire rush. So they see this timber burning, these mountain burnings, and they see dollar signs in their eyes. And I know this because, like you're saying, I was a firefighter. As a young firefighter, I thought, yes, the forest is burning, that's money.
CAL FIRE says a state emergency fund is used to pay overtime in these big fires. Local agencies responding to these fires say they get 1.5 times their pay on top of their normal hours.
Inappropriate things get done with the land because we've seen that for the past 150 years. So I really think if we're going to survive global warming and come up with new systems that make this place inhabitable, we're going to have to listen to the wisdom of Native people.
But allowing tribal burns takes permission.
A lot of times that root causes state and federal law, that it made it illegal to do these things. It made it criminal to be an indigenous person managing our landscape.
The U.S. Forest Service admits when their agency started in the 1800s, they misunderstood the role fire played on the landscape.
They thought that they were protecting the trees. And, you know, forestry is one of those things that it takes a long time to see the mistakes.
Stephen Fillmore, a regional fuels operations specialist for the Pacific Southwest region of the U.S. Forest Service, says they're excited for more programs like the National Cohesive Wildland Fire Management Strategy to help with the issue. The plan would work across tribal, federal, state, and local governments as a way to, quote, effectively manage landscapes.
We're, of course, as a government agency, we have to have people to manage those contracts, people to do the environmental planning to make sure that, the habitat is in, or archaeological concerns aren't damaged. So it's really an all hands. We just need more of the people to do the work.
But right now, it's all just a strategy plan. New programs, laws, and funding can take years. The Karuk Tribe needs emergency action now.
So they actually criminalized all this stuff, so we go to jail for burning. We go to jail for protecting ourselves.
For some communities like Karuk, like their Aboriginal homeland has really been stolen by the United States Forest Service. And so this has a lot of consequences, but one of those is that Karuk people can't find a place to live in their own homelands because over 97% of their homeland is Forest Service land. So, I think federal agencies like the Forest Service are going to have to give land back to tribes so that they can live in their homelands and manage them properly.
Erin Hillman and her family are picking up the pieces of their lives and, with insurance, are fortunate enough to rebuild.
I raised my children in this house. They grew up here, they went to their first days of high school here, they had their graduation parties, their proms. This is my home.
It's taken 2 years to build, but this time they're taking further precautions.
The actual siding is a fire-resistant siding, and there will be another layer of some wrap, and then there will be some sheeting under that.
During our interview, a burn patch could be seen in the yard.
Is that a fire?
Yeah, that was, I thought that maybe somebody threw a cigarette out or something. That scared the heck out of me yesterday.
Right there.
Just goes to show how incredibly fast a small area of grass can burn with very little fuel.
And what would make me feel comfortable would be if we had a 2 to 3 mile wide barrier around our communities of just clean, clear, treated forest, right?
But the history and precious heirlooms her family owned for generations will never be returned.
From tribal member to tribal member's home, there are all these things that were passed down over, generations that we don't have. Photographs, documentation of people that are no longer with us, baskets, regalia. I mean, just the losses are heartbreaking.
As the Karuk have witnessed, just about everything has a cause and effect.
Traditionally, as a Karuk person, we know that management has to be done for everything. It cannot be just timber, it cannot be just fire, and it cannot just be fish.
Now the phrase, "it takes a village," is hitting even closer to home.
Pikyawish, it means to fix the world. Not fix my tribe or fix me or just fix just our place, but we know that the world rotates on a harmonious balance, on an axis. So when things are bad here, they're bad on the other side too. And that's how the world works. So we pray for the whole world in our ceremonies.